And I think one of the responses to Trump directly will be, these are new technologies which are going to be strategic. Do you want to get America to be left behind? Because otherwise China's going to clean up. And if it's made in America, let's say it's an EV factory. If he doesn't like EVs, well, do you know what? Do you want the EV factory to be made in America or made in China? Because it's going to be made. And so I think made in America can be managed cleverly by Americans who are on our side, as it were, over there.
Very good morning and welcome to another Simms International podcast, Making IT Happen. And I'm really delighted on this slightly grey Thursday morning to welcome Roger Whittle, founder of Jigsaw, Apple reseller in the Midlands, who we've worked with for 30 years now, or over 30 years. And our good friend, business partner, Matt Morris, who helps and advises Simms all things sustainable. So welcome to you both.
Good morning.
It's been about a year since I think we last got together in this forum. And what a year it's been. And it seems totally appropriate that we're having this podcast on the week of COP29. And in fact, my reading of it, there's almost more headlines about the people who are not attending or the countries not attending. Of course, we have a new government here in the UK, and we've had 3-4 months of hearing their plans. And then just a week ago, Trump was elected. President Trump was, or President-elect was elected in the US. So we'll be hearing about his administration and plans for the next 4 years. So I think the timing is perfect. Both Roger and myself are still very keen in the investment into our respective companies and committed to net zero. But let's start with Roger and let's get your views on all things global at the moment and how that then feeds into what we are doing with our respective companies and our commitment to continue the journey that we started a few years ago.
Okay, so thank you very much, and delighted to be here again. Looking forward to having a good chat this morning. If one looks at public policy, if I call it that, and I'm obviously not going to get political here, obviously we are all in favour of sustainability in the environment, we know that. But just to try and report on things. So I've got a couple of topics to cover. The first one is Labour and the first sort of 90 days or so. So they've made lots of hopefully enlightened appointments. Remember that their manifesto commitment is to work with the private sector to double onshore wind, triple solar power and quadruple offshore wind by 2030, and to try and achieve as much as we can our objectives towards 2030 on energy security and net zero almost in terms of the energy side of things. They are talking about energy security, lower bills and good jobs, aka economic growth. Let's see. So they've made some hopefully enlightened appointments. Ed Miliband is not only Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, but he was the shadow since 2021. And he held this role from 2008 to 2010. And indeed, it represented Britain at COP15 in Copenhagen. Chris Stark was appointed by the Conservatives to be head of the Climate Change Committee, which is the parliamentary watchdog. He's now been put in charge of this mission control, which is basically hassling everybody on a daily basis, and I mean daily, to make sure that we are going to deliver on clean power for 2030. There are some other appointments I won't go into, like Rachel Kite, who is the UK climate envoy now, ex-World Bank and UN. They've zhuzhed up GB Energy, working with the Crown Estate to manage our clean power projects. They've reinvigorated the UK Solar Task Force. no new North Sea oil and gas licenses, and removed the ban on onshore wind. And they've already approved three massive UK solar farms, five subsea cables, which are very important, and two carbon capture clusters, plus the AR6, the latest renewable energy auction in September 24, produced 131 approved new projects with more investment than ever before. That's AR6. I think we need AR7, 8, 9, and 10 to be equally successful. And then probably we're there. They've closed the last UK power plant, which now means we're the first country in G7 to produce no power at all, or no electricity whatsoever from coal. And although it's very sad to lose the jobs in Port Talbot, where the two traditional steel furnaces have been closed, they will be replaced by greener electric arc furnaces, albeit with less employment in 27. The budget, I'm going to whiz through this. The fiscal rules will enable more borrowing for long-term projects. And while fuel duty frozen was seen as a negative for the environmental lobby, the pluses were as follows: EV incentives, private jet tax, regional train lines and electrification, HS2 going all the way to Euston, confirming the internal combustion engine ban from 2030, hybrids from 2035, more funding for green hydrogen, the oil and windfall gas windfall tax, and more money for heat pumps. The view there seems to be a good start, but more required over the next 4 years. And finally, and then we'll finish on this Labour update, COP29, the UK have committed to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 81% from 1990 to 2035. Linked to this is what Tony Blair has been saying about COP29, which I thought was quite interesting. Just 2 points. He said the key thing is to incentivize private investment to scale sustainable projects globally. So let's get private investment working. And secondly, we need rapid innovation in low carbon technologies, particularly in the hard to abate sectors such as aviation. How are we going to get off kerosene, and agriculture? Which sort of segues into COP29 observations and the response to Trump 2.0. So
get on to that, Roger. Just going to Matt, based on that really useful insight to what the new government is proposing or committing to, do you sense that the new government is going to be good news for what we're all trying to achieve?
Well, I think the short answer is definitely yes. All of the mood music is good, as Roger's just set out. I think the commitment to the 81% by 2030 is excellent. I mean, arguably it's now getting to that 80-20 bit. Enormous progress has been made already in terms of decarbonising the power grid, and the UK is a world leader in that. And certainly, the grid is as clean as it's been for ever, essentially. Particularly now, coal's been taken out of the fuel mix, but that does leave us now very much more reliant on gas. But those commitments that Roger set out are exactly what we need. So it's going to be very challenging. And the early, the last capacity market auction round that Roger described, that there was an excellent response to that. I'm not quite sure why the previous one wasn't as successful, but we're going to be seeing more offshore wind and more large solar. Onshore wind, obviously, very, very relatively inexpensive. I'm not aware of any sort of big projects yet, but obviously it'll take a while to get those going. So definitely some good news there. And the UK has gone very hard into COP29 with its NDC, or nationally determined contribution, of 81% by 2035 on the 1990 baseline, the Kyoto baseline. So yes, I think the government's trying to get the UK's profile back up again, get it into sort of a leading position, and hopefully trying to persuade other countries to go as far and really push their NDCs even further. So yeah, I agree with Roger's report there. I think there's some really good stuff there.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we're feeling positive about what the UK government or new government is doing. So let's next talk about the impact of Trump 2.0. We're going to see his second administration, his first clearly dominated by the news of withdrawing from Paris 2015. But what's your view, Roger, on a Trump administration and the US's commitment to net zero over the next 4 years?
Clearly, European liberals will not be happy with what's happened. It was a close election, although a much more convincing one than had been thought. He did win the popular vote by nearly 5 million people. Clearly, he will withdraw from Paris, and on the face of it, it's bad news. But the world has moved on. China has, I think, about 1,000 power stations. So the number that get closed and then have to be new ones reopened is happening on a quarterly basis. And they have closed their last coal one, and they're only opening new energy ones. China's contribution to these new technologies is huge. Solar, battery, and so on. And I think one of the responses to Trump directly will be, these are new technologies which are going to be strategic. Do you want to get America to be left behind? Because otherwise China's going to clean up. And if it's made in America, let's say it's an EV factory, if he doesn't like EVs, well, do you know what? Do you want the EV factory to be made in America or made in China? Because it's going to be made. And so I think made in America can be managed cleverly by Americans who are on our side, as it were, over there. Linked to this is the green business community's massive momentum, but I shouldn't call them the green business community. Capitalism has realized that solar is really cheap, and it's got almost unstoppable momentum now, solar and batteries and many of these new technologies. Now, Matthew just referred to how well we're doing in the UK. 53% in the last quarter of our power came from renewables. And that's not low carbon, which is including nuclear, which is about another 15. That takes it 68%, over 2/3 if you count nuclear as low carbon. But it's there, it's happening, it's got massive momentum. And I think that is probably unstoppable. The third point to make after Made in America and massive momentum is this. There will be a lot closer ties now between countries which are these liberal democracies committed to decarbonisation. This is going to lead to Europe working together. But there's also going to be a massive move in Africa in particular, and there is already, towards solar. Namibia, South Africa are but two countries where solar is literally exploding. It's growing so fast. The other point I want to make, though, is about I don't want to be political, but the Democrat states, and also what I would call climate aligned cities. Now, if hypothetically you were going to start Uber again today, and this is probably what Uber did 12 years ago, they don't care about countries. All Uber want to be in is to dominate the top 150 strategic cities in the world. Now, there's a thing called the Schroeder Cities Index. I won't bore you with the top 30 here, but I have got a list in front of me. We've got two in there. London is number 2 and Manchester's number 30. And it's based on growth, jobs growth, sustainability, and proclivity to invest. And those cities have all got a mayor, and those cities are all into climate. And my point I'm making is the Democrat states, the business community, Africa, liberal democracies, and these key strategic cities are all together representing unstoppable momentum. And Trump has not been elected president of the world. So I think that together they can continue, if not even slightly accelerate, the momentum we've got. I'm not saying it's unstoppable. but I think it's well on the way. There may also be more money spent on climate adaptation and carbon removal projects, which haven't yet been proven yet. They may or may not work, and they may be more palatable towards the Republicans. But fundamentally, it's that issue about momentum, as well as positioning things as made in America, that I think will mean that it won't be as bad this time as we have been fearing. That's my summary.
And Matthew, your view on, albeit it's only about 10 days of Trump 2.0, as we're calling it, your views on what the administration will look like, and particularly what impact that will have on Europe and the UK.
Well, there's a question. I think there are some slightly alarming things sort of being announced around, I mean, what do I know? But I think, some sort of slightly alarming announcements. And I think maybe this sort of more protectionist outlook that may take place, maybe with trade and tariffs and what have you, is not going to be helpful to anybody. I mean, I think we all understand the reason why, but creating a trade war around renewable energy technology, for example, is only going to make it much more expensive for the States to do what it needs to do. And I agree with what Roger was saying around China's importance for producing these things in the first place. I mean, the US did used to have its own solar panel production industry, but that, I think, that has largely sort of gone away now. So it did used to be a manufacturer of solar panels, as did Europe. I mean, I think Germany was one of the biggest manufacturers, but they just weren't able to compete. So it is a shame that capacity has been lost from the States and Europe, and whether it could come back, I really don't know. But certainly a trade war on various things is not going to be helpful. If it's a trade war around cars and vehicles and small transportation, who knows how that's going to work out. But I can't see it's going to have... It might be an own goal for the States. It might not. I really don't know. But it's, we're looking at a 5-year horizon at the moment. I don't think, hopefully, not too much damage can be done. And as Roger says, meanwhile, I mean, a lot of the businesses I'm talking to are really very much into solar and batteries now. It's just not a controversial investment anymore. People get it. They want it, particularly where small businesses have got locked into very high fixed energy tariffs. They really are trying to get more independence from our grid, for example, now. So that's just going to continue, as Roger described. So I think businesses, particularly small, medium businesses, will continue to make sort of good decisions about this, and invest to save is what I'm seeing at the moment. People are willing to put their money in where it will reduce costs in the medium term. So I'm not sort of horrified yet. Time will tell, I think, but we'll have to wait a bit longer to see exactly what's going to happen. Whether or not he withdraws from the Paris Agreement and doesn't go to future COPs, I don't know. But I think really it's bigger than the States. It can carry on without it if that's what they choose to do. So, yeah.
I mean, there's the headlines and there's the reality. So John Kerry was big mates with his Chinese counterpart, whose name I'm sorry I forget. Unfortunately, now John Kerry and his big mate from China retired at the same time. John Kerry's successor is called John Podesta, and John Kerry encouraged John Podesta to forge and develop and work on a similar relationship with the new Chinese guy who was the number 2 at the time. And in fact, John Kerry said, why don't you invite him to your house for the weekend? And they did that. And they get on famously now, apparently, and John Kerry helped bless this. And there is a US-China methane summit at COP. Now, it won't be reported on because it's boring, because no one understands what the figures are, blah, blah, blah. But it's really, 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 really important. And methane does a lot of damage, about 12 years, and then it does disappear. So it's got a strange greenhouse gas. It's very nasty for a short period. But I'm not saying it's an easy tick box, but it is a relatively containable tick box. Now, Trump is very transactional, and he wants it to be made in America. And if there is a way of making money out of reducing methane, and making that American companies can make money out of reducing methane, he'll be on it. Just wants to make money for America. He's very predictable in that sense. And you hit the nail on the head there with solar panels. we've all been to America for holiday. God, it's hot, isn't it? I mean, you go to these places like Nevada and it's just, you can't exist without air conditioning. I mean, the biggest thing that people want in cars in America is ventilated seats. I mean, it's another world when you go in. And have you touched a can of Coke when it's nearly boiling the metal? And if you were to open it and drink it, it would literally burn you because it's like hot coffee. It's so hot. How can you not have solar? Well, they can't have all the panels being built in China, as if Trump were talking now. They've got to fix it.
Yeah.
They can and they will. And, he'll subsidize the pants off it if necessary. And do you want solar jobs? Or, you can't recharge a lump of coal. You just can't. And it's going to run out. And it is expensive. And we've got this wireless electricity technology. There's a thermonuclear device that can transmit wireless electricity 90 million miles. And it's called the sun. And it's cheap. And that's what Trump likes. And does America want to harness it or not?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to play to his transactional instincts.
Well, on our journey around the world from Britain to America, let's call in Azerbaijan, where I understand there's 80,000 delegates attending COP29. As I said in the intro, much of the headlines about those are not attending. I think I'm correct in saying Keir Starmer has attended, I think.
He was there for a day, yeah, on Tuesday.
So as we said at the beginning, very appropriate that we're having this podcast on the week that the COP29 is taking place. What are our sort of collective thoughts about what we hope will come out of COP29? Roger.
COP29 is all about one word, finance, or rather two words, climate finance. That's what was billed. We've had now 3 quasi-petro states hosting COPs in the last few years. We had Egypt, we had the United Arab Emirates, and now we've got Azerbaijan. So the oil lobby, big oil, have done really well at their lobbying to get COP in all these places. So they want to divert, I think, the attention away from the fact that they are petrol states. Now, if you look at what COP is all about, Conference of the Parties from the UN, it's about 4 things. One is mitigation, reducing emissions. Well, they don't want to talk about that because it's a bit embarrassing. Adaptation, helping countries impacted by climate change adjust. We've all got to do that. The third is finance, helping countries to deliver on climate. Well, that's more convenient and politically acceptable for Azerbaijan to talk about that. And the final one is collaboration, working together. So mitigation, adaptation, finance, and collaboration. And what they want to talk about at Azerbaijan and Baku is finance. And there are going to be a lot of very tense talks about climate finance. To what degree should, I shouldn't say legacy, but don't want to say first world, but let's just say Western established democracies, should they be contributing towards that? Clearly, there'll be compromises and there'll be fudging, but that's the main topic. The other one will be the response to climate denialism, which we've discussed. We've just come out of COP16 in Colombia, which is, they have a different set of numbers for the biodiversity summit. And the bad news is that was a shambles. It ended in disarray with most issues being unresolved. So it's all about climate finance, and we just need to wait for the details. I mean, already I think Keir Starmer said there'll be no new money from Britain beyond that which we've already committed. I think we committed to 11.3 billion in, I think, 2012. So, we can budget for that. But, Trump's not there, Biden's not there, Ursula von der Leyen's not there, Scholz isn't there, Macron isn't there, Trudeau, Modi, Xi Jinping, they're not there. Lula isn't there either from Brazil. Although, if you get all the egos out the room and you get the number 2s, the number 3s, the number 4s, whose job it is to get it done, to working together, maybe that's better. I don't know. Let's wait and see. Will this be the technocrats' COP? But climate finance is the main issue. I don't really expect much else happening other than climate finance? That's the big one.
I suppose the best indication will be the Saturday papers, and will the front pages be dominated by COP29, or in fact, you have to get into page 8 to see what's happened there this week?
It'll be the latter. I think it'll be the latter.
Matt, what's your how you're sort of on day 4? What's your reading of what's happening out in Azerbaijan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Roger's absolutely spot on. Climate finance, there's this big push on getting the amount of money increased significantly. But I'm also just aware that I think on the first day there was an agreement on, I think it was just like a tradable trading carbon allowances or something was agreed on the first day. Some say it was a bit rushed, but there has been some early agreement on the ability of nations to sort of kind of offset and pay for abatement in other countries and do things with that. So that's, I think, more information on that will be revealed. The national determined contributions, which I mentioned before, each country is going to announce that. The UK went very early and very hard with their contribution, 81% by 2035, which is very good to see. Hopefully that will spur on other nations to go further and faster, which is what we all want. There's stuff around the loss and damage fund, which is again finance. But the other thing that struck me was this early warnings idea. And of course, with these terrible floods that have been happening in Spain, the lack of early warning for that bad weather, and it's continuing, I think, either to yesterday, even in southern Spain, there is even more. So this idea about having early warnings is really interesting. And we all know with the tsunami that happened several years ago, that this whole idea around early warnings is just so critical for avoiding loss of life and mitigating the financial cost of the damage that's incurred. So that was quite a new thing for me, and I thought that was very important. But yes, I think the current prediction is that 2024 is going to be the warmest year on record. The 1.5 degree anomaly is we're living in that scenario today, pretty much. And I think the latest forecast is 2.7 degree increase by the end of the century. So we have already kind of met what the Paris Agreement was trying to limit, and we look like we will undoubtedly push through that. So very important, I think, with those nationally determined contributions. That's the big headline that hopefully may be up there with the climate finance as well.
Okay, thank you. And then sort of finally returning back to the UK and our respective businesses, Simms and Jigsaw. Certainly on Simms' side, we're going to be 35 years old in January, and we are working really hard on a plan. Our aim is to certainly be able to offset our carbon, have a plan right the way through to 2050 at least. It seems an appropriate thing to do. So Matt, perhaps you'd just like to update our listeners on what's going on at Simms in both achieving scope 1 and 2. 3 we're kind of covering, but I guess scope 4 is, what are the plans for the future to ensure any future carbon is offset?
The Simms has purchased some land, and it is going to seek the delivery of a carbon sequestration project. It's something along the lines of a rewilding project, but also biodiversity net gain. So we've been working with the Kent Wildlife Trust. The baseline biodiversity assessments have been completed. We now know how many potential BNG units exist on the land, and we've also developed a management plan for the land, which will basically ensure that the habitat management pushes the biodiversity net gain units in the right direction. So two things: the underlying assessment for biodiversity has been completed, and we know what management's required to get it into the condition and the future state that's needed for the offsets. So that's a project that we've been working on for probably about a year now. We are probably looking to start implementing, I guess, probably from early next year, maybe mid next year. But certainly that's been quite an interesting project so far. Kent Wildlife Trust has been very helpful in terms of getting that sort of into a shape where we can visualize where the net gain, biodiversity net gain will come from, and how nature will provide it. So that's been very interesting. The solar PV array has been working happily now since November 22. It's now generated 80 megawatt hours of clean electricity for the business. We're also exporting surplus energy to the grid as well. So we've recently been working with Octopus to get the export tariff in place and the metering set up for that. So that's all working well.
How much of your daily, weekly, monthly, ongoing energy costs needs at Simms, excluding filling up, charging cars, is met by your solar array?
Well, I'll look at the latest stats. I think we are achieving, let me just look at the self-sufficiency. The highest self-sufficiency so far has been about 72%. That was when was that? Which month was that? That was July 23, needless to say, July being the point in the year when most solar energy generally arrives, right down to sort of 9%. But if I look at the average self-sufficiency, it's looking at around about 40% at the moment.
Brilliant. So 40% of your energy needs is met by the sun.
Yes, that's right.
Well done. Brilliant.
Yeah. Obviously, it does vary throughout the year, but it's certainly working as predicted. We could get that self-sufficiency higher if we
got batteries as well.
Well, I was just going to say we could get that higher if we went for a battery storage system as well. Something that we've already discussed, and Andrew may well say go ahead and do that next. But I mean, as I said before, the solar panels are doing exactly what we predicted that they would do. So it's just worked extremely well. The heat pumps, the air source heat pumps, now a year old. It's just had its first service. That's working really well. When I speak to Andrew's colleagues, I say, "Is the office nice and warm? Is anybody complaining about the temperature?" And the answer to that is no. So that's working well. Simms already had some reversible air conditioning, which was being used alongside the gas boiler. Gas boiler's now been removed. The air source heat pump is now taking its place, and in combination, the building is being kept at a very nice temperature. So that's obviously knocked out gas. There's no fossil fuel going into Simms now directly. And of course, now the EV chargers have been in for about 2 years as well, alongside the solar panel project. And every time I go up to Simms, there are several battery electric vehicles happily charging away. Whether the sun is shining or not, some of it's coming from the grid. There's no doubt about that. But certainly the staff and the business seems to have adopted battery electric vehicles very, very easily. I think there are some, in terms of sort of transportation freight for the bit that the business owns, I think they've experimented so far with a battery electric delivery vehicle that might come back. So that's been evaluated. But certainly that package of investment will create a sort of informal offset for Simms, and we're just about to capture that in the 5th carbon footprint for 2023. So we're just gathering the goods out information for the 5th carbon footprint. So that's where we're up to, and we're getting to the point now where we should potentially start reviewing the carbon reduction strategy, refresh it, bring it up to date. So Simms is a small, medium-sized business that's regularly doing its carbon footprint, has a carbon reduction strategy, a decarbonisation action plan, and it is contributing to the decarbonisation of the UK. So it's good stuff so far.
And that is fantastic.
No, thank you, Matt. And then, Roger, events up or plans up in Nottingham continue?
Yes, more sort of marginal stuff, I'd say. I mean, we're being a lot tougher on our reporting. We really are going completely obsessive on that. So we're judging ourselves very, very harshly on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and measuring it all and reporting on it. And there's a steady sort of 20% annual reduction. We obviously have no oil and no coal anywhere. We've got a tiny amount of gas. It's about 4% of one building produces the power for heating for 4% of one building. that's being cut off very shortly. We're doing more work on plastic packaging, more work on waste recycling, on air quality. Our air conditioning units, we're going to try and look at R290, otherwise known as propane, because that's got a global warming potential of 3, and some refrigerants that have been used in the past that will be on many people's air conditioning units have a global warming potential of 2,400 or 650. This has got one of 3. Obviously, CO2's got 1. So looking more at trees as well. So it's just a constant report, but particularly on the reporting, that's been exhausting, but well worthwhile. And of course, once you've got it, you can just update it each year, and it gets better and better. It never stops.
Have your colleagues, there's been a good uptake on colleagues using electric cars?
Uptake's been good. I mean, the salary sacrifice works well on higher rate taxpayers. It doesn't work so well for people who are not on the higher rate. But the take-up is not as attractive. It's an old tax tool which has been reused for this purpose by both parties in government. We're about between 25 and 33%, about 30% take up. So that's good. And our company vehicles, which were ICE, internal combustion engine, were 24. Now got 1.
Yeah.
And it does 2,500 a year. So
yeah. So I think it's fair to say, in summary, that both our respective companies, Simms and Jigsaw, absolutely committed to just being a force for good. And I know I am, and I'm sure Roger, anybody who wants more information about our journeys that we've been investing into, please feel free to contact, as I'm sure Matt would be very interested to give any advice if anybody is interested. So as always, lovely to see you both on what's our now turned from a grey day in East Kent to a bit of sunshine. And the award-winning dog hasn't barked during the podcast, so that's another great success. So as always, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed your thoughts, and until next time, have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Roy.